Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. Adam will be back next week to talk together about other things. But this week, we have Jonathan Hedrick, the writer and creator of The Recount over at Scout Comics, to talk about the book and the Recount preamble and much other stuff about the comic book industry and world, also about his other projects. I can't speak today, other projects that are out there as well, and tease some things that might be coming out at the end of 2022. So check out this episode of the Capes and Tights podcast with myself, Justin Soderberg, and Jonathan Hedrick, comic book creator and writer of The Recount. Enjoy, everybody. Thanks for joining us, Jonathan. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing wonderful. Yeah, I'm sitting in my studio here, drinking some seltzer,
Nice. Yeah, I got the aqua too. Hydrate.
Yes, exactly.
I'm looking at all your stuff in the background. I see a couple slabs from the Recount. Very nice. The yellow label one too.
Yeah, that's the ECGC, the Virgin. It's actually
foil. Yeah.
Got your signature on it too.
Yes, nice.
Look at that. Yeah. It's like
very pretty.
15 of these at the 9/8.
Yeah, not very many of those. Yeah, and that was exclusive to like their legend Patreon members too. So very, very exclusive.
Yeah, and I got it. I live in Bangor, Maine, and we're very small. Okay. That's like I say small. We're the second or third biggest city in the state, but obviously Maine is not very populated as it is. And my local comic book shop is this really small shop, but he knows I love The Recount. And so anytime someone like walks in the door with something, a lot of times he doesn't even have to text me and say, hey man, I got some. He just buys it and then I buy it off him. And that's where that one came from. Some guy just came in and I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
I appreciate that. And I love Bangor, Maine. I've been there once. I love Maine in general. So yeah, I can't wait to go back. If I go back, I'm going to go to that store too. I love supporting the LCSs that, supporting indie comics.
Well, we got 2 Comic-Cons coming up in the next year or so. So you should just figure that out and see if we can get you on the list of people to come up and sign some autographs and sell some books.
I'm down. Yep.
We got one in the fall called Weekend of the Wicked. That's in Bangor proper. And then there's a new con that's called Maine Comic and Toy Con. That's in Portland, Maine, a couple hours south of here. That's going to be the big one of the year. My buddies own the Bangor con, decided to add a second one to Portland that was much bigger. And so bigger venue, bigger everything. So it's just really cool. So
that's what's up. Yeah. I love those homegrown cons.
Yeah. We've had long conversations about how some of the best experiences I've ever had meeting, the people who write the books you read or draw the books you read. My first appearance or first meeting of George Perez was at a small, like local homegrown con. Yeah. He charged me $40 for a photo, a hand-drawn like Sharpie sketch, and signing all the books that he wanted. He signed every book he wanted. Yeah.
That's a deal just for the sketch, man.
Oh, and then now it's hanging in my wife doesn't let me have many comic book things in the general population of the house. Right. But there's one that I was like, I'm sorry, I'm putting my foot down on this one, especially now that we've actually lost him, that it's got to be shown properly in the house. So she's okay with that. It's a nice, simple sketch. It's not overwhelming.
Right, that's fair. And it's not like, I'm sure, a Vampirella or a Lady Death thing in the middle of the living room.
Yeah, exactly. My little 14-month-old son is like learning how to see breasts for the first time because he sees a Vampirella on the wall. Yeah, no. It was great. And it was funny to me. And there's nothing against Adam West, who also is no longer with us anymore either, but was like 2 or 3 booths down from him at this small little con. And he was charging $80 for a photo. And so it was like, to me, it's like nothing against some of these people, and you got to do what you got to do. And people were paying for it, obviously. But I was like, someone who was in TV, who like still making money on TV because he was still in the Family Guy episodes and things like that, or comic book legend for half the price and all of the stuff that he gave. So that was George Perez. We all know that he was, he liked cons, he liked going to places and talking to people and meeting his fans. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, legend. I think all of you guys do.
I try, yeah.
But yeah, I reached out. We said, let's get you on the podcast so we can talk a little bit. It's a little different because usually we like to talk about books that just came out. And we kind of have that with the preamble coming out. So it just recently
Right.
came out a couple months ago.
Yep.
But I just have read now 5, 6, 7 times the Recount. It's nice. It's only 4 issues, so you can
Yeah.
read it that many times.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it. So I wanted to get you on, talk to you about it. You know, not to make your head
Cool.
really big, but I wanted to just talk about how it got started. But let's go way back. Let's talk. How did you
Okay.
get into comics, like reading comic books in the first place?
So I was a huge fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon show.
Okay.
Born in the 80s, grew up in those pivotal decades, 80s, 90s. And I wanted everything turtles. They could have stamped turtles on like a tampon box. I would have wanted
Yes.
to buy that. Um, and my local grocery store had spinner racks conveniently placed by the checkout counters. And yeah, I reached for one of the Ninja Turtle adaptations of the cartoon show. I think Archie might have been printing them at that time, or Mirage. I can't.
Yeah.
Anyways, that got me into reading, learning the sequential medium. That format, and that segued into the X-Men books because at the X-Men cartoon show came out in the early '90s, and they had adaptations of those. It was almost like Chris Claremont. Nothing against him, but it's
Yeah.
a little heavy for
Mhm.
a 9-year-old, 10-year-old at the time. So like when they were adapting the cartoon show into a comic book format, it was like a lighter version of that and easier to read. And then I started learning about the mythos and wanting more and more. And there was just as it is now, there's just an endless amount of material to dive into. And there's just something, there's a genre, there's a story for everyone. So yeah, I grew up, things I blamed the Ninja Turtles. Kevin
Well,
Eastman and Peter Laird got me into comic books, so good on
that's
them.
awesome. Because the people I talk to, it's like funny how many animated TV shows from their childhood is what got you into comic books, whether it be
Right.
Turtles or like the animated X-Men TV show or stuff like
Yeah.
that. Animated X-Men TV show was my personal one that got me
Mm,
into it. Again, you can wake up, watch the cartoon on Fox Kids,
right.
and so on, and it's progressed over the years. But it wasn't until recent years where I actually started reading more independent stuff, so like
Right.
getting away from your big two, your DC, your Marvel, or your
Right.
TMNT. They're not really part of the big two, but they're up
Right.
there with the notoriety of the actual group of characters.
Exactly.
And now I
Yeah.
actually have my
Mainstream indie.
my last Ronin t-shirt on right
Oh,
now, so there
yeah,
you go.
sweet. Such a
uh
good story.
it's great.
Yeah.
Ben Bishop's a great fan of the show, so in
Oh, cool.
friend of mine, so he sends all kinds of stuff. I just got a bunch of new stuff in from him. Part of his he does a Bish Art Kids Club. It's like a membership.
Uh-huh.
I can't show any of it right now because it doesn't come out right now, but there's an awesome special edition comic book that came in it that I was blown away by. That I was so surprised
Nice.
that it was in there. But yeah, Turtles is obviously a big part of most people's lives. But then you
Yeah.
obviously you went into deciding you wanted to create comic books and write comic books. How did you get into writing?
Yeah, so I was always a writer growing up. I liked writing short stories as a kid. I was a big reader, and I think a lot of people that are writers were also big readers too.
Mhm.
And I loved writing, and I just would fill up notebooks with nonsense. And my English teachers in grade school were always like, "You need to do something with this. You're such a good writer, blah blah." And I would even get in some of my other subjects, I would get points taken off because I wrote too much for the answer. Like science class and history. I couldn't condense what I wanted to say in like 300 words or whatever. So, but I never took it seriously because when you're in high school, everyone wants to be a rock star or a professional
Mhm.
athlete. No, there's not very many like cool, hip writers to look up for. You're not collecting like writer trading cards or
Yes.
anything like that. There's like Stephen King, and that's it. So I didn't think too much of it, but and as I think a lot of us do that are comic book readers and collectors, we kind of throughout our lives wax and wane in and out of
Mhm.
the hobby, and if you want to call it that. Um, but several years ago, I'd say around like 2018, 2019, I was writing short fiction just for fun. Again,
Mhm.
not going to give it to anyone else, just doing it just because to get it out of my head
Yeah.
and be creative. But I saw this awesome a live interview with Doug Wagner. He wrote Plastic, The Ride. He's got a new book out with Image called Beware of the Eye of Odin. So I just hashtag plugged, promoted Doug Wagner on the show, but he's a great guy.
Yeah.
But on that YouTube interview, I asked him, how does one get into writing comics? How do you become like a professional comic book writer? Because I had no idea the process whatsoever. And I thought just like you got discovered or something, or you just knew a guy. And his answer was just make a comic. I was like, oh, okay. So that's when I was like, all right, I have some of these short stories. Let's see if I can adapt them into comic book script format.
Yeah.
So I started studying. I took down a bunch of books, watched tutorials online, asked a ton of questions, online, and eventually I had one of my short stories converted into a 24-page comic book. And I thought, all right, now what? So then I asked someone else locally to me, Travis Gibb, popular indie comic book creator, and said, hey man, what do I do with this script now? How do you find an artist? How do you go about printing it? And he kind of gave me some direction, and I learned like from the project manager side of it all, the streamline effect. You give the script to the penciler, and if he also inks it too, then once you have 5 pages from him, send it over to a colorist while they're working on pages 6 through 10. Then when the colorist comes back, you send it to a letterer. And once I understood that whole process, I'm like, okay, this is 100% doable if you have the capital to to do it. So after a while, then I had this like comic book that I wrote in my hand. I'm like, oh, now what do I do? Then I learned about crowdfunding and things like that, networking with retailers. So it all just took, it all came from me asking one question, how do you make a comic book? So I couldn't have done it without the support of other people. This industry, you can't be in your own silo. Even if you can do everything, if you can write, draw, letter, you can't do it on your own. You need to be out there making connections and networking with people and building relations. So that's what I contribute, whatever success I might be seen as having, to other people, for sure.
See, my day job is I'm a graphic designer, and I work for a brewery, and I design our can labels or labels for our cans and so on.
Oh, that's awesome.
I contribute. I relate that the comic book industry is a lot like the beer industry, whereas like a lot of us can do it on our own, but there's a lot of collaborations. There's a lot of things that you reach out to another person. Hey, I need a bag of grain. Our shipment didn't come in. Okay, you can borrow from us. Hey, we need empty cans. There's all that back and forth stuff, which is the same thing in the comic book industry. They realize that if you reach out to someone who is also a quote unquote competitor of yours, their books are only going to sell more if there's other people selling books that are similar to yours and so on. So I think it's one of those cool things about the comic book industry. You see that at cons and things like that, where people just talking to each other, or like, hey, I'll do a cover for your book, or I'll help with this or that. And so it's really cool to see that in the comic book industry. And you're right. It's even if you can do it on your own, a lot of times you need that extra support around you to do it. And I think you can also do it on your own when you get to a certain level. Like if you're at a point where someone's name across the top of the book just sells the book, then yes, at that point, yes. But when you're starting out, it's a little bit harder to do that on your own as well too. And it works that way in the podcasting and other medias and the internet too, and stuff like that as well. So, I'm glad you got into it in the first place. But
thank you.
So then there comes so I don't want to speed across here, but then it comes the recount. So obviously, am I aware you're a U.S. Army veteran? Is that true?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so I'm just like, obviously there's some military aspect of I guess Secret Service aspect of the book itself. And it has come out almost 2 years ago. So it's hard not to spoil it for some people, but in the same sense, like it's been out for 2 years, you should probably read it. But if we can go around without spoiling it for people, we'll do that too, just to make sure that people don't get spoiled. But it's a 4-issue series, and so you just talked about crowdfunding and you talked about how you get the process of it. What made you decide to go to someone like Scout? I like Scout. A lot of love Scout's books, and I have a friend, Joseph Schmalke, who is a co-publisher of Black Caravan. So there's a Scout connection here. But what led to Scout for first?
So I already had my first comic book I mentioned before, Freak Show Princess, already out printed, and I was like just kind of getting my feet wet and making appearances at cons and stuff like that. And at the time, it was around like November 2019, and I already had the script for Recount finished and a few pages actually back from the artist, and I was going to the Daytona Beach Comic Con just to support a friend. I wasn't even
Mm.
going there to like I didn't have a table or anything like that. But I filled my backpack up with some extra copies of Freak Show Princess, and some printed out scripts for my other book, Capable, and Recount. And I saw online that they were going to have the Pruitt brothers, from
Mm.
one works at Scout, one works at Aftershock, and then they were it said that they were going to be looking, they could look at portfolios and things like that. So I was like, oh, I'll just talk to these guys. What's the worst that could happen? And Jim Pruitt was like, here's my card. I like the pages of Recount that you showed me. Email me afterwards. I was like, oh, okay, cool. See where this
Yeah.
goes. Emailed them, didn't hear back, but did their whole submission guideline thing online. Didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'm just so green at this, whatever. But you gotta shoot your shot.
Yes.
So 2 weeks later, I followed up, and then I got an email back from Scout that they were interested in it. And then I had a lot of phone calls with Don Hanfield, who is their one of their chief officers there, and he's wrote a few books too with them. And we talked about the series and its potential. And before you know it, a contract came like a month or two later after that meeting in Daytona Beach Comic Con. I was like, wow, yeah. These things, this stuff can actually happen when you
Yes.
put the work into it. When
Yeah.
it was super uncomfortable to approach these guys, these publishers and stuff face to face. But you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this
Mhm.
business. You got to put yourself out there. And us creatives, we can be very isolating and introverted, but you're not going to get anywhere unless you get uncomfortable.
Mhm.
All these meetings, all these interviews, I listen to some of them every now and then, and I'm like, oh God, I'm just stuttering all over the place, mispronouncing words, not even saying the right word, but it's me getting out there. Who cares?
Yeah.
I'm learning from it all. So yeah, if you don't put yourself out there, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly, and that's with anybody out there. And the same thing it goes with crowdfunding too. Like you have to put your thing out there and expect that people see the amount of
Yeah,
money you're raising. So it's right
right,
in front of people's faces, and if you're not getting what you think you want to get for this book to raise money for it,
right.
it can be embarrassing. It
Yep.
can be embarrassing if you were to pitch your comic book to Scout and they're like,
Mm,
"This is horrible." I mean, I don't think they
yeah,
would say that; they would just
right.
pass. But like,
Mm,
it is one of those things that it can be embarrassing, but you just gotta suck it up and hopefully it works out. And obviously it did
yeah.
for you with this, with the Recount. It's based in the quote unquote real world. I like to say that as a
Mm,
sense because it's not, Scotty Young just came out with his Twig
right.
series and, 8
Mm,
billion genies from Charles Soule just came out and Brian Brown. Those are not based in the quote unquote real world. There's
right. Right.
genies and things like that. This all stuff that could actually happen.
Right.
Does your military service have anything to do with how this came into your mind, or is it just something you thought about on a whim? Like, how did this come about?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, I like the grounded in reality
Yeah.
aspect
Yes.
of Recount because it has its own haunting effect because of, how eerily relevant it is. And which wasn't the intention for it to be so relevant, writing it in 2019. But as far as my military experience, the tactical stuff may have contributed to some scenes, and but I would just say just my me hating politics so
Yes.
much, both sides of the aisle is
Yeah.
what really drove the theme of the
Mhm.
Recount. um, and just me being just so disgusted and having so much disdain for how so many people are, um, they're not supporters, they're fans of some of
Yeah.
these politicians. It's like no, you just like the gear. You like wearing your it on your chest,
Yeah.
and you don't even know what it stands for. You get your information from memes and headlines, and that's
Yeah.
it. So a lot of my stories begin with me with a what if scenario. And I think that's where, if you break every comic book down and a lot of stories, it's like, what if this
If this
happened? Like
happened, yeah.
you mentioned 8 billion genies.
Yeah.
I'm sure Charles was like, what if everyone had one wish? What would that look like? And that's an awesome
Yes.
idea. So much storytelling with that. So I was thinking, what if people were held accountable for who they voted for? And
Yeah.
what would that look like? Would you actually do some research, or would you advertise who you voted for if there was consequences to who you voted for? If that person turned out to be an a-hole, and you had to suffer the consequences because you put that person in power, what would that look like?
Yeah.
And the more interesting side of it would be the whole type of purge element
Yes.
that
Yes.
I put into the recount, because that's a little bit more entertaining and exciting. So it grew from that. It just well, I think at the very beginning I got a lot of oh, you must be, are you a poli sci major,
Yeah.
blah blah blah, or I've had hate from both sides of the
Yeah.
aisle approach me, people assuming that I lean this way or that way. So I started calling it an anti-political thriller.
Yeah.
This is for people who don't like politics.
Mm-hmm.
And even people that like politics and follow politics, they also don't like politics.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
there's a side of politics that they don't like. So that way, calling it anti-political thriller sells a little bit better too.
Yeah.
And to me, I like it that way. I so cannot stress how much it's not agenda based.
Yes. And like I said, it's based in real life. Like it's based in, you said that, grounded things, but it's not like it's based on a specific time in history with a
Right.
specific person. And it's not like you were going back to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It's
Right.
literally arbitrary of when this could be and who the people are and all that stuff. There's no,
Right.
there's races of all races. There's genders of all genders. It's not like there's
Mhm.
specific things. I didn't read the book and go, oh, he's alluding to this person or alluding to that person. And,
Right.
the generic description is, I mean, the president is admitting to some faults. It's not like he's denying a bunch of stuff. So there is that.
Right.
I'll tell you right now, I would love the vice president to be any sort of leadership role in she kicks ass in this
Yeah.
book. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
completely, like, doesn't take no for an or doesn't put up with anybody's shit, just does it.
Right.
And like, this is the kind of politician we do need.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So you don't need a committee to make every little step.
Yes. She'll kick ass. She'll
Right.
tell people what's up. I'm like, this is the kind of person you do need in leadership. And she's not even like the leader at that point. Or I mean, obviously she becomes that, but like but the book itself has that. Do you think you did better in sales because of what was going on in the world? And it kind of related to the idea that there's unrest in political climate?
It's hard to say. Because issue 1 came out like a week or two after the election. And then issue 2 came out in February after what happened at the Capitol. So part of me wants to say, people who may think that it was relevant and timely may have picked up that book. And I also think people who look towards comics for escapism may not have wanted to pick up the book because of that. Or, like I mentioned before, I had a lot of people coming up to me or approaching me online saying, oh, you're doing this because you hate this particular politician. I'm not going to support your book whatsoever. I'm like, all right, you're literally judging a book by its cover. So I'm not sure if I honestly like to think that the artwork is the biggest part of why it sold. The main cover, interior and cover artist, Gabriel Ibarra Nunez, is just outstanding. He's got this real gritty look to him, to his artwork, very realistic. No two characters look the same. There's plenty of big 2 books on like everyone looks the same. Everyone has the same jawline, eyes, figure, but like he meticulously makes every character look different. So I think that the artwork is the biggest draw to the Recount.
I wrote an article on the what book was it? I just did it recently. I can't remember what it
So
was,
many,
but
right?
I bought it because of the cover,
Mm.
and because the cover was just gorgeous. Oh, Astronaut Down. That's what it was.
Ah,
Astronaut Down. The cover is this like space helmet with this guy's face
mm,
and a skull, like a shadow of a skull is coming out of his face. And I
mm,
looked at it, and as a designer too, I'm like, that's awesome. I just want this. And I
yes.
picked it up because of the cover, which is
Mm,
very common in the comic book world because
right.
that's what's
Yeah.
like on the front of the thing. There's very little
Right.
number of words that you write as a writer on the front,
Mm-hmm.
but that cover draws you in. And I wrote, came for the cover, stayed for the story because the
Mm,
story ended up being really good, which is really good.
right.
Same with the
Yeah.
recount, that grittiness and looking at the front of the cover, the graphic design of the logo, the recount, and
Mm-hmm.
I love white backgrounds and white space. I love
Yes.
that simplicity of it.
Right.
It does really well to me. I think Martin Simmons is a great artist.
Yeah.
There's something about how gritty his work is that it's a little too
Yes.
gritty for me. I love the Department of Truth. I think the artwork's great. It
Me
just
too.
sometimes is too far to that direction.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Gabriel did a great job at making it still, like you mentioned, no two characters look the same, which helps me as a person who has struggled with reading in my entire life.
Yeah.
That I do need that visual cue to know that character A is the one speaking and the character A is the one in the relationship with this person and so on.
Right.
That Gabriel was able to do that in this, but still make it gritty and edgy, which is pretty
Right.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And um on that note, with comic books, artwork, gets you in the door. The writing keeps you
Mhm.
inside. That works for readers, collectors, and even publishers. You know, it's so hard to pitch a comic book series with absolutely no art.
Mhm.
Every script, yeah, could be the best thing or the worst thing, but once you put artwork to it, then that it changes things tremendously. So yeah, I contribute the success of the art.
So Gabriel obviously did the work on the Recount 4 issue series, and there was also an artist in there between that did some pages as well. Is that true?
Yeah, Gabriel did issues the Ash Can and issues 1 through 3.
Okay.
The main covers for all of them, and Joe Picardo, he's a Spanish artist, stepped in for issue 4 when Gabriel wasn't able to
Okay.
meet the deadline due to a personal issue. So and Joe Picardo knocked it out of the park. He had like a that was 28 pages. I think he did those 28 pages in 27 days. That's brutal. He knocked it out of the park, and he had to like reference Gabo's
Yeah.
work too to make sure it wasn't too far off. But yeah, I asked him before with the preamble if he wanted to come back for that, but he was just too busy. So
And
yeah,
then
that's
so
the way
yeah,
it
obviously
works.
you have Gil Lopez did the stuff
Mhm.
on the preamble, right, too?
Yeah, yeah. Ruben, he goes by Ruben Gill.
Okay.
It's a little confusing, but
Yes, it's
his name
fine.
is Ruben Gill Lopez, but his
Goes
artist
by
is
Ruby. Yeah.
Ruben Gill. You know how it is, man.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Ruben's great. I brought him in on a suggestion of my editor Andrea Molinari. Ruben's another Spaniard, and yeah, awesome artwork as well. Fits the mood of the recount, that realistic side of it all. And it was awesome to work with Ruben on the preamble.
With the first series, your Recount number 1 and so on.
Mhm.
How does the relationship go between you and the artist? Is it like basically you give the story to that artist and you
Mhm.
take what they basically give you, or what do you have some say as a writer?
Oh, as long as I'm paying for the pages and
Yeah.
I'm doing that for the majority of the projects I work on, it's yeah, I'll if it doesn't look like what I was envisioning, I'll ask them, to make certain changes. But then sometimes their changes might not have like a sense of purpose, like
Mhm.
how I can't do that many actions in one panel. I'm like, oh yeah, I look back at my script and I have someone, you know, doing 3 things at once with their hand. That works fine in the movies, but
Yeah.
it doesn't work, in comic book in a 2D type medium.
Yeah.
So yeah, I take suggestions, and a lot of things turn out better from the artist and how I wrote the art direction.
And that's why I think again we go going back to having multiple people involved in a project like that, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something to be said about that. There is this side that, and second in mind, my normal co-host who doesn't come on usually when we do have a guest, but Adam and I were talking about one point making a comic book, and it was like, well, who
Mm-hmm.
would write it? I'm like, well, why don't we co-write it? And he's like,
Yeah.
well, would you draw it? And I go, I don't know if I could do sequential art. I'm
Yeah.
very good at one can, doing one thing and
Mm-hmm.
doing it once. Drawing the same person over and over again in different shapes and
Right.
forms, I think I would go crazy doing that. So I would
Yeah.
like to hire another person to do the artwork. And he's like, okay, so they got a team of 3 or 4 with letterer and color and all that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
go, but I think that team works because I think there's people
Yeah.
who have different inputs on different things that just will make the book an even better thing. And so
Yeah.
I think you have that right with the idea that they may actually know a little bit more on what they
Right.
want to do or how they do it. Because it's very easy for people to go, you should do it this way, and then they go, well, it's not
Yeah.
really possible to do it that way, but we'll try.
Right. And I've seen other creatives and publishers even like, it needs to have this, and the artist will come back, and the things that I'm tagged in, like, well, this is why it doesn't work that way. You're
Yeah.
gonna wash out the page with if we want to make everything this particular color or whatnot. But I'll show you how wrong you are in just a second. And sometimes people pay for those mistakes too.
Yes. Yeah.
If they're so adamant about it.
But there's something. So I think I wrote in the review too about it's eerily, or what did I say it was? I can't remember what I said. I had it at the top of my head. I wrote it down somewhere. Unsettlingly realistic or something like that. And you wrote back, yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yeah,
I said it was. It's an unsettling thing. It's honestly, my wife and I are reading a book, Beginning at the End, book by Michael Cho, I think it is. It's about a flu killing people in the world. Like it's such a weird, unsettling thing to think about right now in the past 2 years to read a book about post-apocalyptic stuff. Like we just read Station 11 and we're watching the show, and it's like that's also about a flu that kills people. Like it's scary to do that. And in the moment we live in an unsettling world we live in, reading something that's like you could like literally turn the TV on and see the events that happened in the Recount on TV and not be surprised by it, which is sad. And again, both sides of the aisle, both things I'm not surprised about. So were you planning this to be 4 issues? Or is it like, what's the idea behind only doing 4 issues, I should say?
Because I have to fund most of my work, everything is limited. It's always going to be a mini series for the most part. I had a different ending in mind for the Recount for the first few issues, but it organically evolved into something else. So I was like, okay, I have one arc here. I can come back and do, as long as I have a decent closure for this first volume, I can come back and do multiple volumes. So in that way, I can make this world a little bit bigger and not rush to fit everything in just a 4 issue. But I need to get to A to B somehow. So yeah, it was always intended to be 4 issues, but it was going to be a different story. It was going to have a completely different ending. So now my plan is 2 more volumes over time. And I've already started working on the 2nd volume and just waiting for the artist to be available.
Which are like, was that part of the reason why the preamble came out, to kind of like give a little break, but something for us Recount fans to read? Or
it was partly that, part of just me wanting to tell that side of the story. A lot of it's timing. I have a dry erase board behind this computer, with all these different projects. I'm like, all right, can I fit in the beginning of a mini series right now, or should I just do a one shot? If I do that one shot, how many pages do I have time for, and how much money do I have to fund this, which is always the biggest question. So yeah, the idea for the preamble was always there, and it worked better as if post volume 1, but I felt like this could also serve to establish events in issue volume 2, which doesn't those things in preamble that will lead into volume 2 obviously aren't apparent until people start reading volume 2, and then they're going to see 2 purposes of preamble. So right now we see like the adding more meat and potatoes to
Mhm.
the background of the leader of the masses. And there's something else that it's in the preamble. People read issue 1 of volume 2, they're like, okay, we know that person already,
Yeah.
and they were introduced in preamble. So,
Which is awesome. It's like one of those things. It honestly caught me by surprise a little bit. I don't know how I missed it. I missed the solicitation or something. And I was
it
like literally
happens.
putting down pull this stuff. And I was like, holy crap. Well, how did I miss this? There's always, I feel like once a month there's a comic book that somehow it just slips through my fingers that it's coming out. And I was so excited for it when it came out.
Awesome.
Yeah, on that too. But and I don't know how much you can say about it and stuff like that, but there's news out there that there's going to be something in this on the screen with this of this
Right.
thing that it has been optioned. Is that
Mm.
something you can talk anything about, or is there?
I can talk about the director, Peter
Okay.
Landesman, who is co-writing it with his writing partner. What I was told recently is that they have the script done, and now they can shop it to studios, which is
Okay.
a big hurdle in Hollywood. Is which studio is going to invest a lot of the money into making this script, and then what kind of changes they want in the script, for them to make it. So, I mean, having it's actually kind of working a little differently. Usually, a studio and a producer is like, oh yeah, we want to get that, and then they search for the director and the screenwriter. To have a director already attached and with him and his writing partner, and them wanting to seek studio to film it and everything. It's works a little differently, but it's also having someone that's already on the creative side of in Hollywood
Yeah.
wanting to invest their time and effort into it speaks volumes. So yeah, I mean that's about all I know
Yeah.
about it. I haven't seen the movie script,
Okay.
their version of it. I haven't been in contact with them, but it's also like I don't want to muddy up that side of it because one, I'm not that egotistical where I need to have my hands involved in it. Plus, I don't know that side
Yeah.
of that. Screenwriting for film is something that I don't know, and all the different moving parts in Hollywood. It's its own beast. So I'm going to let it do its own thing, and if they want to get me involved at some point, I'm open to it. But yeah, I'm more of like, let me know when there's actually news.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
because it does take a while, and it's one of those things that people talk about online, and there's
Mhm.
different things I've read where it's like, so if we're gonna say we're at a stage at a 10, we're on stage 6. And it's like
Mhm.
been 3 years since there's been news that there's someone shopping the comic
Right.
book as a show or a movie. And it's like, it does take some time. Some of them move super quick because of other reasons, but
Yeah.
there are some things out there that like, I mean, were you surprised? Were you what we obviously didn't plan to write the recount to make it into a movie or a TV show?
Right. Yeah. When that was mentioned to me, I was like, whoa, because I was still like trying to catch my breath from even getting uh, it signed to be published. And
Yeah.
then before issue 1, I knew about the movie before even issue 1 was even solicited.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how long I had to keep it under wraps. And
Perhaps.
imagine having to hold off on that knowledge. Your first published book is going to also be made into a
Yeah.
movie. I've had to bite my tongue for like a year and a half, it felt like. And so yeah, it was cool, but I remain the same status of like when something when I see a trailer, okay, I'll find,
Yeah.
or if
It's
they
real.
invite me onto set or something like that, I'm like, okay, this is actually happening.
Yes.
But in the meantime, yeah, it's super cool that people are that far interested in it. But I'm also not, counting my chickens before they hatch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those, it's just a cool thing. I mean, like I said, it's anything that becomes someone else is so passionate about your project as well that they'd realize that they want to do it in their medium is pretty
Yeah,
cool. I mean, if someone came to you and say, hey, we want to make a podcast, a scripted podcast for it, you'd probably
right,
be excited too, because it's
right,
someone doing a different medium of the things that you created and came from your mind,
exactly.
which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, not only did it have the success of someone wanting it, but your first issue went into what, 3 printings?
Yeah, yep. Third printing came out last November, like a year afterwards. So yeah, that was really cool too. Wasn't expecting that second print either. Like a week or two after the first issue got dropped, they're like, "Hey, can you scare up a second print cover?" I'm like, "What?" because I'm still like working on other aspects of other things. I'm like, I thought Recount was already in the past, and me having to come up with another cover caught me off guard, but was super exciting. And plus, seeing that second print cover that Gabo did is one of my favorite ones out of all of them. Super creepy cover.
It's just a cool. I've talked to a couple of people about printings and things like that. And nowadays it's one of those things that there's like the Grimm comic book that recently came out over at Boom. Yeah. Like their second printing was a week later. Like they had sold so many in FOC and in pre-orders that they're like, oh crap, we're not gonna have enough of the first printing. And a week later I was in the shop and I'm like, didn't that book come out last week? And he's like, yeah, that's the second printing. I'm like, wait, what? And now they're on to I think they're on to a fourth printing of that. And it's like, it's insane how that's worked and how that is some people are unprepared for how successful a book can be. Or it just takes people just find somehow it finds a way and people are so excited about it to read it and so on. So I mean, and so you've also written other books too. I want to touch a little bit about Lower Your Sights just because it's a big thing.
Please.
So it's a benefit anthology for Ukraine. Can you just tell us a little bit about what's going on with that and how you got involved in that?
Yeah, so the senior editor at Mad Cave, Chaz, who recently started at Mad Cave a few months ago. He's done a lot of stuff at Scout too. He heard my name. He knew about the Recount, of course, with his experience making Scout books, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, got this anthology. I know you're a vet, and I think this would be a good fit for you. Problem is, I need everything: script, pages, colored, lettered within 30 days. Can you do it?" And I'm like, yes. If it means
we'll make it happen.
If it means I could be a part of this super great project and getting my foot in the door with Mad Cave too, so and I reached out to Gabo from the Recount. I said, "Hey buddy, let's do it again." So that is my story in Lower Your Sights is actually very, very deeply rooted in my military experience.
Okay.
Is basically pulled from a story, something I experienced myself. I didn't write my name. I just gave the character a different person's name, but that's me in my story in Lower Your Sights. The timing of the events that occur are a little bit different, but that happened to me, and I thought it would be a good story to put in there. Because when Chaz told me about the project, he's like, it's a war anthology, but it's not, Sergeant Rock. It's not, things like that. I don't think Michael Bay explosions. Think about the side of war and military that people don't typically see. So I thought about those times when I was serving, and the things that people don't see that aren't so fantastic. We know about the horrors of the actual battles, but there's other sides of it. Like, for instance, the hurry up and waiting, and it's I remember those 3 years, the feeling that I had the most often during those 3 years is the boredom. And the boredom was like torture, just waiting. It was so terrible. So I wanted to pull in something like that, and without giving away the story. But yeah, I'm so happy to be a part of Lower Your Sights. It's a wonderful project. I hope everyone can pre-order that. It's available now to pre-order at your local LCS. So
it's pre-ordered. Previous came out the 29th. I just reading online. FOC is the 29th of August, so making sure you get it in before that, and it will be out in September. Looks like September 14th, officially in stores. But it obviously is all. I'm guessing a portion or all the proceeds go to a charity of sorts that helps with Ukraine. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe all proceeds are going to it's called Voices of Children. Yep. And that's basically they try to use artwork to ease some of the impact that these children have had in Ukraine. You can send money and all you want over there, but what's the money going to? So it's like helping with the emotional support of these kids over there in such a tragic time. And there's even Ukraine artists that are involved in that project. So
cool.
it's just super cool. I'm glad I have a small little sliver of contribution to it. It's one of the most biggest things I'm proud of doing, to be able to do something like that.
It's cool because I talk and write about funny books. You write funny books for a living. So it's like, it's nice to have this opportunity. Like, what can you do as a person who writes comic books to help someone in Ukraine? Like, if you put those two connections together, like, this is not possible, but yet there is this option. And we do that in the beer industry too, with making special fundraiser beers that we have and things. And there's some places in Maine, some t-shirt companies who made some t-shirts that they basically donated to the breweries with their logo on it in the Ukraine flag print, and did things like that. So there's definitely ways that everybody can get, attached to some sort of charity or some sort of thing like this, even if you're writing funny books for a living or so on. And it's really cool to see that. And it's one of those ones that's like, you buy it because you're going to have some great stories and some great artwork in it, but also it goes towards something good too. So I'm really excited for it as well when I heard about it as well. And so, which I'll be just buying everything. I bought Space Cadet too, because my son's name is Nova. And so I thought that would be a great one to put in a bag and board. And he's old enough to read it. He can read the Space Cadet as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, and then you obviously have Quicksand as well. People can get into that. You can find out more information on your website. Man, I've been talking too much, right?
In your line of work, I'm sure. But got to keep the lozenges and cough drops on standby.
You mentioned about writing too much and that stuff too. Is I am a person just talks too much, and that's why obviously you get into some podcasting or talking for a living, because it's gets everything out of my mouth. And again, and I still stutter over things and say the wrong things, even when I do this a lot more than probably you do it. So it has happened. So
well, I mean, it sounds more natural that way too. It doesn't sound like two robots talking. That to me, it should sound like a conversation and not Alexa talking to Siri.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of those things that you see the difference between like late night TV shows nowadays, where there's people stopping on. Like, if you were to go on to a late night TV show and pitch the Recount, you'd have 3 minutes to try to pitch what you need to pitch about this thing. Instead, you could have a generic conversation with someone about it and naturally come up with things. And that's what's cool about the podcasting world, is you get more natural speaking things than you do. Like, you're not sitting there with a bullet point. Okay, I got to cover this. Got to cover this. We're just talking. I mean, there's no reason to talk about things you don't want to talk about, but also not like cram everything into 3 minutes. So
exactly. Yeah.
But so people out there who are listening, obviously you have a website. What's the website?
JonathanHedrickComics.com.
And obviously you're on Facebook, Instagram, all those things as well. And you, is it just your name without vowels? Is that what it is? Or is it?
That's what it is for Instagram and Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I'm going to try to say it, but I'm like, I'm not going to. If you go to JonathanHedrickComics.com, there's links on there to your social medias, and that's a lot easier than sometimes. It's one of those things nowadays, coming up with usernames for people, unless you have a very, very, very obscure name that's short. You're going to have to do things like that. I even tried to buy my name from someone who has the same name as me.
Really?
And they didn't want it. Had not. I was on Twitter before I did this stuff. I was a sports writer in Massachusetts.
Oh, all right.
And I wanted my name as my handle on Twitter, because I was on Twitter all the time. Yeah. And so I went to change my, because I obviously went in 2009 when I signed up for my Twitter, I did something stupid. It was some sort of stupid line from a song probably or something. And so I wanted to change it to something that's more professional. And so I reached out to the person who had my name as their Twitter handle, and it hadn't tweeted for like a year and a half. And so it's like, oh, come on. Okay, what do you think? He said, I'll be willing to pay for it. He said, no, I'm not going to. And then tweeted something random, like just some random thing. So he obviously now is in the Twitter bots that go out there and say this is an inactive profile, became active again. And I was like, whatever. I'm like, I don't know what I would have spent. I mean, make me an offer, man. Say something. Like $100, $1,000. I can say no, but I don't know. It's kind of funny that it was worth it to him to keep the name. And so now I'm at JM Soderberg, because it works well. But it was just kind of funny. I'm like, that's why it's harder to get people's name. And with Jonathan Hedrick, it was a longer name, so Twitter doesn't let you have that long of a name. And so easy way to do it is get rid of the vowels and do that. So follow him on Instagram, Facebook.
Please
buy
do.
your
Yeah.
books at your local comic book shop. Some of them, like the Recount, are probably not, hopefully not on the shelves there anymore. But is there a trade coming out, or is there a trade?
Yeah, there's a trade. Yep,
Okay.
trade's available. It's at your local comic book shop can order it. You can order it straight from Scout, and other retailers have it too, like Barnes and Noble and Amazon, things like that.
And the cover is just the cover of issue 1. Is that what it is?
Right.
The white,
Yeah.
white,
They asked me if I wanted a different cover for the trade. I was like, no, let's go with issue 1, like most of the other publishers do. Plus, I don't have enough money to pay for another cover.
Another cover. That's when you hope that your artist goes, I have 3 options for you. And you're like, cool, keep the other 2 options in the bank, because we're probably going to need them for second printings or a trade. So
yep. Or just a graphic for some promotional reason. Nothing.
Well, the Ashcan one's pretty cool too, though. That black cover, the one I used for promoting the podcast episode, was like that black cover with the white stuff on it's pretty sweet too.
And that came from Gabo, just like, hey, I just did this for fun. Use it for what you wanted to use it for. And the Ashcan was just like a last minute idea. And they're like, oh, do you want a cover for this? I'm like, oh, I thought you guys were gonna just put it in the back of another comic. You're gonna make it print it on its own. It's only 4 pages. It's gonna be like a leaflet. So I didn't have anything else other than that image, and I said, use this. It's black and white.
It's funny how much stock has been taken in ash cans nowadays too. Because like that we mentioned Twig earlier, Scotty Young. I don't know if you can see my tattoos. A lot of my tattoos are Scotty Young artwork. But his Twig one, the preview was like $129. People were reselling them for on eBay because it was 1 per store ash cans. And so this became a 1 point per store comic book. And I'm like, it's like 4 pages of a book. Like it's not even the whole thing. Joe Schmalke, his 7 Years in Darkness book that came out recently, actually got it back there. His ash can for that was printed specifically for that. It was like a special way of printing it. It was like a limited edition thing. So not only was it a preview for the comic book, but it was like a printing press in northern New Hampshire is the only one in New England that does the printing the way it was done. And so it's like, okay, that makes more sense to me. But that's just a simple 4-page thing with a different cover in it to preview the book. I don't know why it should be worth that much money, but hey.
There's a purpose in it somewhere.
Exactly. And you're getting paid for it, so it doesn't really matter in your point.
Right.
But and so you have comic books for sale on there. I see that. I saw that earlier today. So check out those books on there as well. Some CGC stuff and some CBCS stuff on there. But do you have anything right other than this? Lower Your Sights. There's nothing coming out right away, right? There's everything else is in the future.
There's actually something 1 or 2 things should be solicited next month. With a publisher that hasn't announced those projects yet. But in August there should be at least 1, if not 2, from the same publisher titles that will be solicited for sale in October. Again, they haven't announced it yet, so I can't say much about it. And then in the following month, so I guess that would be September's solicitation or on sale in November, should be my first issue with Black Box Comics. I have a series coming out with them. They haven't announced the title and everything like that, but so this half of 2022 is actually a lot going on, and then something else at the beginning of 2023. And I hate being the guy we see that so often with creators, like, I got something really cool I want to say, but there's not. So this is just an empty tweet. But please keep your eyes out on previews, and I'll be, as soon as the publishers announce those things, I will share it all out until everyone's sick of hearing me talk about it. But super excited about this second half of 2022. Lots of things coming. So
that's awesome. And I'm a lot of friends with some comic book retailers. Get in by FOC so they know what you want for books too, because it really helps them with the pre-sales of those things. Tell your local comic book shop. Most of them won't charge you for them yet. Just tell them you want it so they have the book in the store. And sometimes there's incentive variants for people too at stores. So if they ended up ordering 9, but they didn't know you wanted 1, they got 10, there was a 1 in 10. So just do that for the local comic book shop, because it's definitely worth it. And buy from local comic book shops or local artists online directly, because that's really worth it too, because they're the lifeblood to the reason why I have a Recount. You know what I mean? So it's definitely worth it.
Support your local comic shops, 100%.
And I'm all for reading digitally too, but like buy the physical copy from your LCS and then buy the copy digital so you can read it on your iPad. So you
exactly.
just bag and board the other one so you don't get any fingerprints on it, and then read it digitally so you have both copies.
Keep it crisp. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then maybe you won't get a 9.6 instead of a 9.8.
Well, better than a 9.4.
It is, and my Something's Killing the Children came back at 9.6 too, which I thought was going to come back at a 9.0 or a 9.2. So sometimes you get the benefit, sometimes you get the negative.
I have the Jay Lee variant of issue 1 of Something's Killing the Children at a 9.6, but I also have it signed, by 2 of the creators. So that 9.6 bumps up a little bit with 2 signatures and a yellow label. So my
favorite thing in the world is there's a meme out there from The Office when Creed was the manager for what day, and Pam walks in there with 2 images and says, "You need to find the 2 differences. Corporate needs it," and they're the same image, and I love that. And it was a CGC label. It says 9.6 and 9.8, and it was like, "Tell me the difference." And said, "There's nothing different about them."
Right. There's just two different graders, probably.
Yes, it was the weirdest thing. But you know what? 9.6 is good. And like I said, I'll take that on the recount. Yeah. This 9.8 is definitely more worth it with that one, too, because it's obviously a little bit less limited edition as well. Yeah. And I believe I have a non-slabbed recount around here somewhere as well. But
so many books.
That's just too many. It's way too many books. This is only even a portion you see back here. Behind me is all my long boxes and short boxes. But hey, it's better than drugs. I'd say that much.
That's for sure.
But so check out Jonathan on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Go to his website, jonathanhedrick.comics.com. See him at cons. If he ends up at cons or things like that, say hi. Reach out. It's worth reading the recount. Again, try to buy it in trade. And hopefully at one point you buy it in trade and then you get to see it on screen some point down in the future. But if not, we'll just wait for volume 2 and we'll get to that as well. But thanks for joining us, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Justin. I appreciate it.